Welcome everyone who has joined us for this session, for our quest, basically. We know that it has been a very long day, also with 2 other very long days, and sometimes we're brain dead, or our cells are consumed with different other thoughts and so many topics and themes around the buildings, but we want to try and do a bit of an innovative approach to this. We chose to have it as a fishbowl. That means you're not going to be sleeping. You're going to be asked to contribute. You need to kind of have those cells revive themselves. So I hope you had coffee to try and get some caffeine and talk, because we're not here as just experts to lecture or say anything. We're here to bring some teaser questions in order for us to look for solutions for our quest of retrieving assets. And maybe beyond the assets themselves, reinstalling justice for the people by bringing that back, what they own that has been sitting somewhere around the world and is still being stolen and sent somewhere in the world. So the whole idea of this session is to actually say bluntly what are the challenges, but also say bluntly what are the opportunities, because sometimes we're afraid to challenge ourselves with some ways and some tools and some legal frameworks, or some need to say that there is a change. And we need that, because if we don't think together or we don't brainstorm together, then we will just end up giving that only to maybe some lawyers who are trying to write a certain legal framework without touching base with the people on the ground, the people who are practicing, the practitioners on the ground. So we hope that you really would tell us what you think, that you would actually help us put some solutions, some recommendations that we can take forward. Also probably ideas that you have gained from across the conference today. So to start, my name is, according to the old agenda that was just changed today, the kinda hater to corruption and to people who steal assets. So they misspelled my name, that some people read it as kinda hater, but my name is Kinda Hattar, and I am the MENA Regional Advisor at Transparency International. And I have been working for 12 years on different thematic things in the MENA region, but I think asset recovery and the challenge of asset recovery and bringing back what was stolen from the people back to them is a passion before it's a profession for me. So I'll be coordinating the talk, and we'll be speaking about so many things, hopefully today. And with me today, we have put a panel across disciplines and across regions, and looking at different sides of the asset recovery. And I would like to start with Peter, to ask him to introduce himself in the way he would like to introduce himself.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My name's Peter Jonath. I'm with GIZ. I'm Australian. I live in South Africa. I work in Iraq. I'm not here speaking on behalf of Iraq, but I'm going to speak on behalf of Iraq because I think the narrative needs to change about Iraq. I'm passionate about the work I do there. I've been there 2 years. When I said to my family and friends, I'm going to Iraq, they asked why. That needs to change. It needs to change from why are you going to Iraq? Why not? I think in the 2 years I've been there, I've really seen a significant change in the way that Iraq presents itself. it needs to really take a commitment from the international community to change the narrative. The narrative needs to change. And I think a significant milestone for Iraq happened 3 weeks ago in Bahrain, where Iraq went before MENA Fatah plenary, and they are subject to a mutual evaluation report assessment. Everyone said Iraq would be grey-listed. Iraq avoided grey-listing. And I think this speaks volumes about the work that we as the international community can do with, through the partnerships, through the cooperation. I work in a program in Iraq that looks at different elements. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on asset recovery, because I'm not. But what I am an expert on is bringing together different individuals, organizations, institutions to support not only Iraq, but the MENA region. And I think that's important. I think we need to look at the region, not just the individual country. So my experience has been from a number of years, 10 years, working across the African continent, combating illicit financial flows, working in anti-corruption, working with ministries of finance, strengthening capabilities. And I think what we, as an international, and I speak for myself, I don't speak for the other panelists, I think one important element that we need if you work in development is leave your ego at home. It's not about you. It's not about me and what I do or what I achieve. It's how can I best support the partner, the collaboration, the institutions I work with, and in grounding, in establishing capabilities within those institutions that are sustainable. We talk about sustainable goals, we talk about sustainability, but we forget that it needs to be anchored in a way that when I walk out of that program, the capability stays. And I think this is really important. I won't go into more details. I think one of the things that I will take away from this conference is there are a number of key messages that came out. And I think one of the messages that we need to look at for asset recovery is what are the enabling environments that allow the assets to stay and not be returned. I think that's one key message that I will look at when I go back and see how do you start to address the enabling environment.
Thank you. Julia?
Myself?
Yes.
Just to introduce myself now.
Introduce it? Yeah. And then we'll go into the quick...
Okay. So my name is Julien Courson. I'm the executive director of TI Lebanon since December 2018. You've asked me why am I in this field? Why am I interested not only in asset recovery, obviously, but also in the fight against corruption? So effectively, as if you're asking a doctor why he's interested in the fight against cancer. Same, corruption is like cancer, and I think this is part of my role and job, specifically in a country that has been, I would say, destroyed by corruption. We all remember the 4th of August 2020, the Beirut port blast. One of the main reasons behind this explosion was corruption. So I think it's very obvious and important for all of us to join this fight.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Hi, everyone. So Charlotte Palmieri, I'm a litigation and advocacy officer at Transparency International France on illicit financial flows. So I'm working on ill-gotten gains cases in France that arise since 2010, and which implies corruption abroad with money laundering in France, and mainly in the real estate sector. And we've also done a lot of advocacy regarding regulation of real estate sector, advocacy for public register for beneficial ownership, And previously, I've been working at the French Ministry of Justice on following up the FATF work. And there has been a lot of discussion regarding asset recovery and how do we improve legislation regarding asset recovery and how can we strengthen the legislation. We have a lot of discussion regarding non-conviction-based confiscation, notably in the context of the war in Ukraine and with the necessity to reconstruct the country afterwards. So I've been passionate about it because I think that it is at the same time a fight that really needs to be done and also extremely difficult. So that's why I'm here today to talk about it.
Thank you. Hazem?
Hi, everybody. My name is Hazem Al-Namle. Until recently, I was the research coordinator at TI for the MENA region until Kinda Hattar kicked me out, and I'm trying to be a free agent at the moment. So if anybody willing to pay for my services, I have a lot to offer. I am in the wrong section of this business. I entered TI because I want to learn how to be a corrupt person. I did some research on that, and I think I have quite enough knowledge to start my own business in corruption.
Well, you know how to now elicit some funds,
Yes.
probably. Thank you for your quick introductions. I hope it can bring you a bit into our world of how we actually came together. So I'd say, Peter, when I first met you in Iraq a year and a half ago, the first things that came to mind is to speak about, what can we do for the assets of the Iraqis that are abroad? The Iraqis are doing so much. They need assistance. It's just moving the jurisdictions outside. There is a challenge. It is hidden somewhere. How can we find it, and how can we help them? So from your work on that aspect with Iraqis and how our kind of work developed, the means of finding solutions to making those two worlds speak, the host countries versus the countries that the assets are stolen from. So what would you think, or in what aspect we can bring those to speak together properly? And how can we do that? Should we just work with the countries that the assets are being elicited from? Or should we also speak to the host countries where they're not so easy to let go of the funds back to those countries?
One thing that I do want to mention is asset recovery is not in isolation. I think you need to look at the broader context of, where is the economic environment of the country that the assets have been stolen from. Why is there a void there? Why is there this need to recover the assets? I think you need to look at it from a multi-dimensional perspective. Asset recovery is just one element. We also need to bolster the economic development in a country that allows private sector development, particularly in Iraq. Iraq is a country that is dominated by oil. 91% of the oil revenue contributes to the domestic resource mobilization. So you need to expand that. You need to diversify. One of the things that I see as a challenge, you say, do you need people to talk to each other? If you need the people to have a dialogue, you also need to have the people having the same tools, the same level. They need to be comparable in being able to have and communicate internationally with the counterparts. One thing I realized when I came to Iraq is the policies of the 90s where information technology, computers, basically ITC was not allowed into Iraq. So you have Iraq that is already behind the 8 ball in terms of its ability to access basic technology to put them on an equal footing. I remember I went to the Commission of Integrity, and one of the things they did say to me is, we are not being accepted on an equal footing with international jurisdictions. They do not see Iraq as a competent jurisdiction, particularly in putting together these complex cases that need to access the international jurisdictions. They need to get their counterparts to have support in mutual legal assistance. It's one of the things, I asked a question in one of the other panels where they said, in the European context, you have a number of different measures for recovering assets. And I said, well, what research has been done on mutual legal assistance? The resources that are required, particularly for countries such as Iraq, that are not coming from the same level playing field, they are behind their 8 ball, and there needs to be more support. I think it's not something that you look at them or look at jurisdictions as a poor cousin. You see them as an equal, and you need to build that level of trust and honesty in the competencies that exist.
Maybe I move to a different jurisdiction, and I know that in France and TI France specifically, and I think it has kind of a unique approach even in our movement, and the jurisdiction that allows civil society to take part in retrieving assets or prosecuting for that. And that's a model that we don't see in other parts of the world. Maybe in the MENA region we'll come to our, I think the only jurisdiction that allows civil society to pursue that is Tunisia, where they could be part of any legal frame. But I know that there has been a lot of pressure you took on as a chapter, because you had that mandate and that passion. You have helped retrieve some of the assets, so some African countries. If you could speak to that experience of engagement of civil society and the important role that you have brought, even cross-border and cross-region, not just nationally.
Yeah, so obtaining legal standing in France has been quite a long judicial battle that started more than 15 years ago with the so-called ill-gotten gains cases. So like I said, it's like corruption abroad with money laundering in France. And yeah, it was difficult because the first time we filed complaints against several former leaders, including Théodorine Obiang, the former vice president of Equatorial Guinea. And at first, prosecutors dismissed our complaints because they didn't want to investigate on foreign leaders. So we had to bypass the prosecutor's decision and to file another complaint to be recognized as civil parties against the same leaders, including Théodorine. And the perseverance of French SEOs led finally to a decision of the French Supreme Court in 2010, which recognized our legal standing. And it has been a huge success because since then we had the opportunity to initiate legal proceedings and to overcome potential inertia of law enforcement authorities in order to bring cases to French jurisdictions. And I think that past experiences have shown that civil society really can play a key role in asset recovery proceedings. In most countries, CSOs do not have legal standing, and in France we have so. And we've seen its various cases. So we've been involved in cases linked to Africa, but also Eastern Europe recently with several complaints that we filed against several Russian oligarchs for money laundering in real estate sector. And what we've seen is that we can also bring key evidence to the proceedings, thanks to the network of the civil society. It's linked to other foreign CSOs, but also to investigative journalists that came to us, bring key information that allow us to have a real discussion also with prosecution. While, of course, representing victims, claim for damages, redress, and restitution of assets. And I think that what is important as well is that strategic litigation allowed us to advocate to change social norms. And we have advocated in TI France the recent years in order to create a specific framework in France for a responsible restitution asset mechanism that promotes accountability, transparency, and inclusiveness of civil society during the entire restitution asset mechanism. And it has been enshrined in the law in 2021, and we had a first conviction against the former vice president of Equatorial Guinea, Theodore Obiang, confiscation of all of his assets in France, and we are going to realize the first restitution under this French law, in which we hope it will comply with all the guidelines that we provided in terms of transparency.
Thank you. And probably I'll ask a question now before I go into both our colleagues here. This is a success story with all the challenges you have. Who or what do you have in your own countries and jurisdictions that could be a challenge that you think that we can change or probably address from both first interventions? Is there something that you would like to see or hear more about in order to drive that change in your jurisdiction, or what you see from your practice? Because I know we also have practitioners who worked on the topic and in different jurisdictions. If there is a challenge that links to both our first speakers, anybody wants to share? Tino.
Microphone.
I get Tino. Official name.
Thank you for this very interesting introduction. My name is Agatino or Tino Kamharda from CFAR, Civil Forum for Asset Recovery. And I want to just kick off this conversation with one challenge that we see across all countries working on all cases and countries, contexts working in asset recovery, and that is access to information. It's a really basic need for anyone to step in the process, to know how many assets, who they belong to, what is the status, are they frozen, are they confiscated, what are the diplomatic discussions about the use of these assets, the conditions that countries are posing. This is something that civil society struggles all the time. So I think one key point to consider here is how do we involve civil society and citizens, journalists, into what is possible to know. Of course, you cannot publish everything because often you have ongoing investigations, confidentiality, but there needs to be some level of sharing so that we can start working on these things. And yeah, of course, if the panel has thoughts on this, I'm very happy to hear.
Thank you. I think, yes, please. We'll take 3 interventions, go back, and then go back to the...
My name is Nariman, and currently I'm working for UNDP Iraq. But before UNDP Iraq, I worked for UNDP Uzbekistan. And there is a really interesting challenge for Uzbekistan in recovering assets from Switzerland, which once was stolen by the daughter of previous president of Uzbekistan. We had president of Uzbekistan Karimov and his daughter stolen almost $1 billion, which is now frozen in Switzerland, and the government of Uzbekistan working on recovering it. So success part was that they succeeded to return now around $300 million. But when the second claim went to the court, or to Swiss court, for next part around $600 million, so the court decision was like, we do not consider the daughter of the president as a public employee, so she could not be part of corruption scheme. So the decision was to return these $600 million stolen from Uzbek people to the company owned by the daughter. So, I mean, despite we are talking a lot about asset recovery, still there are legal challenge. When one court decided to return and another court decided to return to the people, another court decided to return to the corrupted person, despite she's in prison. So this is the case from Uzbekistan.
Okay. Tunisia?
So basically on the challenges in the context of Tunisia, we have...
If you want to introduce yourself
yes.
only.
So this is Wajdi from iWatch organization, TI Tunisia. So basically we want to highlight two main challenges in the Tunisian context, which are mainly the diplomacy or the executive. So this is the one, number one. Second one, the judicial. So for the diplomacy, sometimes we have a lot of issue when it comes to the succession of governments, in which creates like a gap. The other one is the incompetency of the people who are actually dealing with these files, in which actually results in the losing of these assets. We can tell more about these details, but the second point, which is the judicial system, sometimes we see that there is corruption, or there is also a kind of influence from the people who are being part of this process. The people have been accused to return the assets. In this context, we see that the judicial system sometimes lack what we say the mechanism to allow them to do their work, and sometimes this is intentional and unintentional in both cases. But by the end of the day, we figure out that, and we saw that even with the help of civil society in Tunisia, we end up that the big failure was in the judicial system because of the influence of the corrupt people still there, which actually obliged the civil society to take part, because in the Tunisian context, civil society organization can take part of the efforts, but still it's not enough to retrieve the money, because the only small amount that was retrieved was only with the effort of the civil society organizations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back to you with around, and I think I'll link it also later to the next intervener. But I want to go back to Julien. Okay. Now that you're, you can pour water if you want.
I like it.
Well, I think all these challenges fall in Lebanon too, no? With all the system that is now, I don't know if we can call it the system in place, because there is no system in place in Lebanon.
It's a system.
It's a system, yeah. The no system is a system.
Of a system is a system by itself.
And maybe the small Lebanon in size, let's put it, has so many big problems, I think, that is impacting a lot of people. And also has gone wider than its borders. And we can see that 2 days ago there was a case on HSBC Bank in terms of the former head of the governor of the central bank, Riyad Salameh. So something is moving, but something is not moving inside Lebanon, not by the people or by the system in Lebanon, but external. If you can give us more of a highlight of that.
As you said, something is moving. And allow me to go back to give a bit of background first. To go back to 2019, October 2019, Lebanon witnessed a popular uprising. So we saw thousands of Lebanese demonstrating in the streets all across Lebanon, demanding reforms, and most importantly, the first ask, and that was a bit controversial, because we're tackling a topic that is not really of popular nature, highly technical. But the first ask was to recover assets. And back then, coupled with international pressure, because the Lebanese state was in a very dire budget situation, and they were requesting money from international community, from donors, and the donors community. There was a kind of pressure on the Lebanese government to embark on a journey of reforms as a precondition to support Lebanon financially. So the international pressure coupled with the local demonstrations led or pushed the parliament to pass two laws. One of them is, I would say, very important and that can be very promising, which is related to, I think, what Peter was referring to, more of a preventive mechanism to keep the assets inside, which is related to illicit enrichment and asset disclosure. So the Lebanon currently has an asset declaration and illicit enrichment law that is more or less in line with the UNCAC provisions, specifically when it comes to the declaration of assets and interests. That it has some opportunities within it, but obviously the effective and efficient implementation of this law needs internal and external pressure, similarly to the passation of the law itself. The second law is related to asset recovery. Honestly, I won't spend much time on it because it was just, we were ticking the box, an exercise that's really empty from the inside. But this can be also an opportunity, but I'm not seeing it on the short term. So those two laws, in addition also to additional legislation, for instance, the establishment of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, were the result of popular and international pressure. But I guess the most important aspect that is affecting the asset recovery ecosystem in Lebanon, is investigative journalism and the Lebanese diaspora. And this is, I think, the diaspora as a concept, specifically for countries, the MENA region or any other region where, let's say, they have a presence in European countries or any other countries of destinations eventually, they can play a very important role in triggering the process of recovering assets. So there was a huge effort done by investigative journalists led by OCCRP, ARIJ, local also media outlets, which focused on the governor of the central bank, Riyad Salemi, the one that you've mentioned. So there was a lot of information out there, well documented, evidence-based. Among the issues that he's facing is conflict of interest and kickbacks through a company owned by his brother, Raja Salemi. So that was, we were able to know more about this case through the efforts of investigative journalism, but most importantly through the relay of the Lebanese diaspora. Currently, Mr. Salemi, who's the ex-governor of the central bank, is facing 5, I think, lawsuits in 5 different countries in Europe. England, France, Switzerland, Germany, and Luxembourg. So I think his assets are confiscated at this stage. So we're still within the due process of law. But if there was no effort on behalf of investigative journalists, coupled also with the role of the Lebanese diaspora, through them those complaints were filed, and through their intensive work on collection of information that is of paramount importance, I think we would have been now discussing just the theory of asset recovery related to Lebanon. So we have a concrete example. It's not a success yet, but I would say it's a partial success because no one was even had the idea of getting to where we are now. So my main message, and to answer a bit the thematic of our discussion today, is that in specific cases, the diaspora can play a critical role in the country of destination of illicit gains.
I think this panel is giving more and more complex solutions to a simple word of asset recovery, but I think a hopeful one, because we don't need to go one way in retrieving the assets. We can go multiple ways. We can go the national way, which is the legal system, maybe the anti-corruption agencies that will look into it. That's more the formal legislative way. We can go the civil society way can go the diaspora investigative journalism way in terms of putting pressure and exposing this. But I think it also brings to our attention in countries that are not stable or that are going into conflict or coming out of conflict or war across, and we're seeing more and more conflicts around the world. And now we have a very in the MENA region, although this is not a focused session on the MENA itself, but also we can see that even in the future of anything in relation to the Gaza war that is happening right now, that there will be a room for also sealing even the aid that comes into reconstructing probably Gaza, or we can see that there might be confiscation by other, let's say, means to the money that is coming in. How can we look at legal frameworks when we don't have rule of law that is there in a country that is facing war and conflict? And I think you were raising probably your hand if you want to come in.
Yeah, talking about Gaza, my name is Ghassan. I come from Palestine, but I come from Jerusalem, unlike Wael, who came from Gaza. And I have to mention that 90 members of his family were killed.
We're happy that he was able to make it.
Yeah. But I'm not here to make a political statement. I just want to respect the title of the workshop. The assets in Palestine were confiscated, overtaken by a consortium of actors. You all know probably that Israel is taking over the water, land, properties, sea, and now after Gaza, they are taking also over the gas, Palestine gas. But that's and also our corrupted leaders, Palestinian leaders, they have contributed to the state of corruption, state of like it is accumulated case, accumulated state where it started with the cancellation of the election, then the destruction of the legal system, and the dismantling of the parliament, and like that. But that's what is specific to Palestine. But what is in common in the region is that the culture, there is a cultural issue that the assets are the ownership of the people, not the ownership of the leaders. And that's why leaders, they cancel elections so that there is no say for the people. Now, this is, that's the corrupted people, and I cannot blame them. I think they should be persecuted. But what I can blame is the international community, including TI, including the IMF, World Bank, and other multilateral agencies, who almost, sometimes we believe that even they joined the system. They know that this leader is corrupted, and they go and talk to him, and they talk to her, and they meet them, and they become part of the system, and they respond to their demands. Now, what we, as a professional humanitarian worker, we used to blame TI that there is no accountability, prediction, and prevention mechanisms. If we had CBI, for instance, it could have acted as a prediction tool. It could have told us that war is coming. But TI, and I'm sure that there are lots of things that were beyond their hand. It has been discussed a lot. They failed to do that. CBI was implemented in Palestine for years, and then the corrupted leaders, they thought that this is telling bad things about them, then they just canceled it. And for the international community, for intellectuals, for university people, I think CBI could have been a great tool for prevention and protection. Honestly, if there was, we believe that one of the main contributing factors for war, or even the current war, was the corruption. We know that the war is done, or the decision of making war is made by persons. It was not made by the people. The people did not decide a war, even from both sides. So, but the accumulated state of corruption from both sides, I think, contributed to the fragile state. Thank you.
To explain, CPI is an index of perception that depend on a methodology of sources that we couldn't get enough sources for Palestine to be in the CPI. So this is why it's not there. It's not because the leaders told us not to have Palestine. And we have had this disclaimer on our CPI methodology out there. But we wish, and we've been pushing to have more sources that we can actually give the best indicators for Palestine to be on the index. But driving away from that, if there are other challenges that you see in terms of, or we've spoken about challenges, let's put it this way. Any other opportunistic tools or ideas that we can look for? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Abir from Transparency International, Jordan. I think speaking of preventive measures, I think we should also consider the monitoring of the asset declaration of people in higher positions, parliamentarians, people in the judiciary system, and also politicians in general. So I think this contributes a lot to the prevention measures that we could
and not that they are secret when they just join, they put them in an envelope and it's not investigated. They have to be open.
What I meant is the periodic monitoring of the asset declaration and advanced systems in the monitoring of the declarations.
Thank you. The third one, and then we go back to Hazem, then we go back to Zay.
Thank you. My name is Mariam Karoui Diaby. I'm working as anti-corruption expert at the African Development Bank. Mm-hmm. So very interested by the discussion, in particular the asset recovery side when it comes to African countries. So I've been listening to you regarding the case of the bien mal acquis when it comes to Guinea Equatorial. So I know that Transparency International France and Sherpa have been doing a great job on these cases. But currently, the asset, the confiscated real estate, from what I heard, that people are continuing enjoying, yes, benefiting, using this real estate currently in France. And also regarding the law, from what I know is a budget line within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that will be used to support development projects in some targeted countries. My question is, do you know if there will be, like, if we confiscated 100 million for Equatorial Guinea, this amount will be used only for Guinea Equatorial project, or it will be used for all kinds? So it will be like in this line, you will have specific amount for different countries, or it will be like a global amount that will be used for all development project financing by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And also, I hear from the Kazakhstan case, I know that Basel Institute of Governance has been doing also a lot regarding when it comes to Switzerland. He has been a lot of things doing that. Maybe if there were one person from this institution there, I think they will be able to provide more details. And also regarding the remark of asset declaration, during our work with African countries, so most of the African countries have in their law the asset declaration obligation. But the tricky point is they have it like with no details. Asset declaration, and then when you will start your mandate, you have to declare your asset. But as you said, they are not investigating. So they just put on an envelope and that it is put there, and let's say the objective of this asset declaration, this is monitoring the illicit enrichment of some of those leaders, has not fulfilled because we are not using the data. So how to make this more efficient? And also, as you are all anti-corruption experts working with several countries and continents, in the cases you have been investigating and working on, is there any gaps when it comes to legal framework we could address, or also institutional framework? Because from what I've seen, maybe sometimes people want to do, but they don't have the expertise and the capacity. So it's not always like political, as we say, apathy, but sometimes they are missing the expertise. And this is also what we have to look through. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wants to respond before I go to Hazem? If you want to respond to...
Yes. So to answer your question, so 150 million euros has been confiscated in the Equatorial Guinea case. And when it's confiscated, we need to sell the good in order to turn the asset into money. So we're at this stage for now. What is very important is that in all law, the budget line is very distinct from the one of development aid. It is not under the French Development Agency. So it is a specific budget line that is piloted by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but that will go only to Equatorial Guinea projects. And right now we are under negotiation with civil society organization in order to select projects that contribute to the population needs at the closest, with transparency, accountability, guidelines during the entire process. So we are at this stage.
I'll come back to ask you another question on that, or not just a question, a teaser for us to think about it. But I want to go to the well, Hazem co-authored this session with me when we put it forward for the ISSC, thinking how we can go regionally, thinking about the asset recovery, especially that we also have interest in bringing jurisdictions together and having a regional asset recovery project. The research part, the academia part, the literature that is out there on asset, what is missing? What is it from theory to practice? What do you have to say to this aspect? Because when we write laws, they're there, they're words. But we're looking at the technicalities. What is missing?
So, I don't know if you notice how many sessions in this conference about asset recovery. There is quite a lot. And always like it has almost the same story. We started by, there is money, there is illegal activity happening, translated into money. This money traveled and stayed somewhere else. And we need to bring it back to the origin. And they tell you the story perfectly. And sometimes we have creative solutions, sometimes we have creative problems that we need to find answer to it. What's fascinated, and here is a rhetorical question, what's fascinated here is how you can read that story. It's always started. I stole the money went to France, Switzerland, I want to bring the money back. You see it as a linear thing, always. You never start to thinking about it like, even before the money is stolen, there is a bank in Switzerland encouraging you to steal the money and send it to Switzerland. Even when we have like a problem with the access to information, also we have a lot of regulations, like the one that you just mentioned in Lebanon, that encouraging you to declare your assets. Asset recovery and illicit funds, never an event that starts from A, finishes at Y or wherever. If we start thinking about the whole process instead of linearity as a spiral, you always have to accumulate, you always have to ask the same question, never have an answer that says like if we pass a law or if we have a strong institution or civil society or international collaboration, we'll finish with the story. Because those who are stealing the money and sending it away also listen to the same story that you are telling and improving their capabilities to enjoy the money that they stole. Whether they're gonna come and say like, you know, the daughter is not an official public servant, so she cannot be taken as a criminal person, or whether I will be returning the assets for the country to buy goods from another country or to help with the development. All of these things is still happening at the same time. So it doesn't matter where we start, and this is the point. It doesn't matter where you start. Start somewhere, but think about it not in a linear way. Think about it as a spiral. You keep asking the same question, but improving the answer, the way you answer, because you already moved somewhere. You already accumulated, you already reached something, it's already happening. In those stories that we've been listening and hearing about, is like you always started with, we have political will, either it's there or it's not there. So if it's not there, you want to work on it to have it. So you have the civil society pushing for it, you reach there, but then you discover that you don't have legal system for it, or you don't have enough investigative journalism. But you don't need investigative journalism. What you need is forensic accountant to do it. You discover that, oh, there is now the cryptocurrency and like the blockchain. So we need to understand how computer works suddenly to return the money. All of these things needs to happen in a parallel way. That's why asset recovery is not a task for civil society or for journalists or for the state or for the international community. It's a task for everybody. And you need to engage and build coalitions to tackle all these issues at the same time, not as one issue after another. Because always there is somebody who's ahead of you in the game. And always when you have an answer, many questions will appear on the same issue that you targeted.
Yes, and that brings us to also think that the corrupt find innovative ways of finding new ways of corruption in new names, new avenues that we have to, like, as you said, and thank you for bringing this up, as that was a follow-up also question for you. In the era of digitalization, we think, oh, the digital way is the way to, we're going to have everything there registered, we can trace it. But still, there was this challenge of looking at this blockchain that is happening right now. So there's a parallel world that we're living in that is happening, that, oh, the blockchain, it could be the way where we can actually save or know who has bought what and save. But the money that went in at the first instance, so the person had 4 million and bought that villa, and then it's now registered in the blockchain, and then it's sold through the blockchain. But nobody questions, where did he get that 4 million from? So they can actually launder money, although you can trace it afterwards, but who can guarantee that the money that they got in the first place wasn't laundered somewhere? And who is there that is holding those task force to investigate this money? Because you don't ask, this is how they launder money, basically. You don't ask, where did you get this from? But now, oh, we're going to legitimize it and put it in a blockchain. So even in the era of digitalization where we think it's a savior, it could be, and we need to keep up with the trends of how to protect the assets. So a next question would be, what is a technicality that we are missing that the European Union, for example, after confiscating Mubarak's asset in Egypt, and the Mubarak family was able to turn that verdict and return their assets, and they said, oh, those assets should have not been frozen because there was a technicality. It wasn't that they were not stolen assets. It was a technicality, a judicial technicality, a prosecution technicality that overturned that decision. And we lost the battle, and the assets were back into the Mubarak family. Although the Mubarak family is saying, you see, Europe declared that we were not corrupt. That was not the decision. The decision was there was a technicality issue in the prosecution. Do you have any input on that?
Yeah. I go back to what is the topic, the quest to retrieve assets. At what point do you stop having that quest? What point do you say to, that example of the 600 million and 300 million went back to the daughter's company? We expend enormous amount of resources. Everything's a trade-off of what we're doing. I'm working with partnerships with yourself, with UNDP in Iraq. We're building capabilities to bolster the judiciary, we bolster the officials, the capabilities, all of that. That comes with the quest to retrieve an asset. We go back, why don't we look at how do we prevent that? In Iraq, there is actually, there is political will to prevent corruption from allowing these, what they call the heist of the century. It was uncovered that $3.5 billion went out of government accounts, and it wasn't transferred, it went out by suitcase. So what I would say is, let's strengthen the institutions in the country to allow the country to operate with state capability to prevent and encourage not people to steal, but to look at the benefit of having a capable state, a state that focuses on the citizens and, opportunities for future generations. Because if you look at the demographics across Africa, you look at them in Iraq and across the MENA region, it's the young people. It's not me anymore. It's not my future. It's the young people's future.
You're still young in spirit, Peter.
Sorry?
You're young in spirit.
Yeah, not really. Not really, not at all. I think we need to kind of shift the perspective on what we're trying to quest and maybe look at sometimes you just pull the plug. Just pull the plug. I'm not saying you should pull the plug on everything. I think there's expectations that you have to meet within your different jurisdictions. For example, the case of Equatorial Guinea. There's expectations, the government needs to do something, but at the same time, the government also has to say, and it comes back to your question, with Mubarak, it's an enabling environment that allowed this to happen. What more can you do? What more can you actually do than already has been done? In economic terms, it's a sunk cost. Maybe focus now on resources and trade-offs for other investments.
Any?
I completely agree with you there, that you have at some point need to decide this is a dead end. We need to invest somewhere else, absolutely. But also we need to have an eye on these processes to know exactly why I failed here, why it becomes a dead end. Because even if I have a strong institution, let's assume for a minute that the US is a strong state institutions, there is a lot of corruption there, and there is a lot of money going out from the US. Now, they don't spend the same amount of investment to retrieve them, it's true, but nonetheless, it's still happening. So just having a strong institution does not prevent the future. However, if I will be preparing myself as a society, as a state, that it's not an A to B process, it's a process that I'm gonna live with. So I'm always gonna need to update myself as a society. Yes, sure, then deciding this is a dead end, move on, absolutely is the answer.
I just make one sorry. A point I did want to make is there needs to be stronger cooperation within jurisdictions, like in the MENA region. Don't do it alone.
Yes.
You know, if you want to go far, you go in a group. If you want to go fast, do it alone. I think, you know, it's something that I saw recently with the MENA region wanting to establish the MENA ARAN, the Asset Interagency Informal Network. And I think, you know, this is something that really speaks volumes about don't do it alone.
Absolutely.
Use the peer learning, use the lessons learned. All of that, it's something, and it's the cooperation and the collaboration, not just in institutions like where we are, but also between states.
And there was okay, there, because you're standing, and then we'll give our colleague.
Thank you for a great panel. I'm from Azerbaijan exile-based activist, working in Switzerland, but working on Azerbaijan. And our one of priority, we are always figured out how to increase our efforts with stolen assets recovery initiative, because all anti-corruption fighters in exile have a big problem with the lack of funding. No one wants to support us in exile because lots of like-minded states getting cheap oil and gas from Azerbaijan, they make a deal with the dictator Aliyev. And we have like very strange example. One of the successful cases, few cases in the UK, when we managed to investigate like politically exposed people, like ruling family members, president's relatives, members of parliament, national crime agencies and serious fraud office start investigations under unexplained bail order. They confiscated these assets by the court's decision. They paid fines to UK Treasury. In the end, under unexplained bail orders, it's one of the part regarding the recovering assets, they must return back to the legitimate democratic government. We're able to engage with the UK authorities to say, guys, don't send this money back because it's same puppets of regimes. It's money from Aliyev or their proxies. One of MP bought a 22 apartment in UK. Now they're confiscated. But problems when we start to ask, guys, could you give us money to preventing and investigating more? Because we spent like 10 years to expose these guys. 30 of our colleagues arrested in Azerbaijan. We even don't have money to pay their legal costs, help their family. After 6 months, what we understand, all of these assets, which is these corrupt officials paid to US UK Treasury, it's more than 50 million pounds. Nothing go to civil society. All of this money is distributed between National Crime Agency and Serious Fraud Office, because they say we also need more finance to investigate more corrupted people in UK. How it's possible for us, like for small organizations, change agenda like in UK? Or another example with the US whistleblower law. When they charge under US law big transnational institutions like a Danske Bank or Goldman Sachs, they paid billions to Treasury Department or to the Security Exchange Commissions. In the end, in the happy end, like they paid like 10% or 20% as like to concrete whistleblower who provides this data, but civil society institutions and journalists from origin country of origin who work under threats, imprisoned journalist murdered, these people never received any cents also from US government. And we find this absolutely unfair. How it's possible to change? At least UK and US have a good practices, but when it's related with whistleblowers, they're able to pay awards to whistleblowers, but we as like journalists who expose this corruption, and when we're looking for funds to expose more corrupted officials, we not manage to get any pennies, like, or any cents from these assets, which is confiscated. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting a very, 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 very important thing that I think we've, one of the plenaries that has resonated with me that I will take away during this conference was the defenders, defending the defenders, because we're speaking not just about human rights activists or anti-corruption activists, or we're speaking about people in their daily work, in their daily, that we're not, probably they're not activists, but they come across a corruption scheme or an event, and they want to come forward and speak how to give incentives to those people, not necessarily money, but incentives that you're protected, you can come forward and you're protected and nothing is going to happen to you. And I know that we have anti-corruption agencies that also we have laws that protect whistleblowers or journalists or anybody who comes forward and maybe protect their identities if it is at that point. However, that enforcement of security and maybe also defending them if they go to court, we have cases against one of our chapters or the Palestinian chapters for exposing a corruption linked to the topic that we are speaking about, and they are also facing defamation case. So they can take you to court, but who can defend you? That is also a technicality. That is an issue. Where can we find a solution? Even in countries where there are human rights, let's say, champions, we need to move that agenda. I saw another hand here, I think. Oh, Arwa, yeah, sorry. I thought, yeah, Arwa, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arwa Hassan. I'm with the GIZ in Frankfurt Eschborn. I was with TI for many years. Kinder is a good colleague of mine. Yeah, I want to say a couple of things, actually. I'm very glad Kinder mentioned the world conflict, countries in post-conflict, has referred indirectly to the complicity that's prevalent in the system, and the lady who talked about the Swiss banks. Via years and years and years of working with countries, either in conflict or post-conflict, I found from my experience that asset recovery is very closely linked to people's sense of justice and injustice. So even after you have post-conflict, even after you're working on building state institutions, it remains a thorn in the side of any new regime moving forward if they're not able to make progress on asset recovery. When you think worldwide, when you actually look at the statistics of how much money has been stolen from people and how much has been recovered, it's very, very poor track record, right, in terms of how much we've been able to recover and how much has been stolen. I would say, though, from my experience and from the people I've talked to around the world with facing these challenges, that it's so important not to give up on this, and it is a highly important and critical issue. And I would like to cite a case that I remember that was quite well documented. It goes back some years now, and it was about, it was concerning the Congo and assets that were recovered that were due to go back to the Congo. And actually the Swiss bank that was involved had held onto these assets and did not want to release them, claiming that the government that was now in place in the Congo was actually, not to be trusted, so to speak, and they had no faith that if these assets were to be returned, that they would not be somehow laundered or stolen again. And I think this raises some really, really critical ethical questions, because who is the Swiss, with all respect, who is that Swiss bank to make that ethical and value judgment? Surely the money should go back to the people, to the country, and they decide with their government. Yes, the example that was given with Uzbekistan, I think, is very unfortunate, but I mean, what's the solution? I don't have the answers, but I think it's important to pose these questions. And that case was very well documented, and I think the issue is that Swiss bank does not have the moral authority to decide that it's not going to repatriate those assets. Yeah. I think for me, this is the bottom line. It's really so tied up with people's DNA of what they feel is justice and injustice when it comes to moving forward, rebuilding state institutions in a post-conflict scenario, building trust in your politicians and so on. You can't just put the lid on it and say, and just throw your hands up and say, we can't move forward on this. I think it's still a very worthwhile endeavor. Yeah, thank you.
Can I pose this challenging question to you, Julien? If there is now a decision to retrieve those assets back to Lebanon in the chaotic situation that Lebanon is living in, and nobody did the ethical judgment on returning it, and it was returned to Lebanon. Let's say it was returned. Where would it go? How would you have faith in it going back to the people? What is a solution?
That's an easy question.
Please.
Practically, yeah. No, I think it's a threat. It's a serious one. Specifically in the case of Lebanon, and I think other countries also, where you still have very weak institutional and legal settings that would protect this money, or at least make sure that if it's dispersed back, it's in the right direction. One thing, but also I'm not sure that what I'm suggesting is practical, but I know this is maybe an option that can be explored. While the Lebanese parliament was discussing the legislation related to the oil and gas sector, in Lebanon we have a nascent oil and gas sector. Unfortunately, or I would say fortunately, we didn't strike yet a commercial discovery. But nevertheless, when the parliament was discussing the issue of the SWF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, it was decided that all revenues that are starting or to be generated from the sector to be parked in this fund until further notice, until we envisage or we come out with the best way to use those funds. So maybe, but again, this needs a political agreement, and in the case of Lebanon, and obviously many other countries, this cannot be done through only counting on the consciousness and ethical values of many political decision makers. But this might be, or if it cannot be done at the local level, at least it can be parked somewhere until a further notice. I think this is a way to reduce the damage, but it does not provide a full-fledged solution.
Yes. I'd like to. Yes, please.
Thanks. My name is Dan Clayman. I'm with the U.S. Department of Justice. I've been working in kleptocracy as recovery cases since like 2000.
You're in the place to tell us
So I appreciate this really robust discussion, and I think it's a lot of the challenges have come out, and I think there are a menu of different solutions, some of which work, but many of which we have to keep looking back at. I had sort of two questions. One is, particularly for the MENA region, there are some jurisdictions that don't cooperate in asset recovery cases where law enforcement does try to trace and recover assets, and that are also havens for illicit money. And I was wondering if this civil society group that has particular expertise in the region is seeing the same thing that law enforcement is seeing about some of these jurisdictions that are not being cooperative and are being havens, and if there are ideas that you have on how to sort of change that environment so that more recovery occur within the region, or where assets from other regions are attracted to the new money laundering havens. And then my second question is to address this very complicated issue of returns. Returns, on the one hand, are theoretical unless you actually freeze, confiscate the assets. If you don't find, freeze, and confiscate, there's nothing to return. But I think now we're seeing more returns and more confiscations. Maybe we're seeing more corruption too. So I don't know if it's a net gain or not. But we're, I think, realizing that our legislations are not adequate to accommodate the sort of the different interests. And I know in our government has a proposed legislation to try and make things a little bit easier, but for us to navigate this. But I think when we are in the environment where we do have the opportunity to return assets, we are necessarily going to be working with the other government, and the other government is going to be saying, you know, we're the representatives of our people, sovereignty, we should be deciding what to do with the assets. And then sometimes we hear from civil society, don't transfer the asset, as we heard today, because it'll get re-corrupted. And there are real consequences for our programs. Like if money gets re-corrupted, who's going to want to fund our asset recovery efforts in the future? Because they'll be like, well, what was that all for? And so I guess how can civil society contribute to that dialogue so that the countries that do have to engage with their counterparts through foreign relations know what the priorities of civil society are so that they can advocate to include those in the returns. Because we're not necessarily going to know what the priorities of civil society are, whether it's reinvesting in anti-corruption institutions that we've heard a lot about, asset disclosure is very important, or whether it's on the development side or somewhere in between. And so I think that I'd be interested in reactions to those. Thanks.
If I would answer part of your first question, and then I leave for anyone even, but also for the speakers to answer the second part. One thing that is very, and also this whole asset recovery thing is a complex thing, and you're speaking about cooperation of jurisdictions. And we see that. That is a challenge not just in the MENA, that is a challenge even in jurisdictions that we think are open enough to share that information and that are safe havens. So if we pick the top safe havens that we think of, London is one of the safe havens that we have. Dubai is one of the safe havens that we have. But one of the main projects that Transparency International has worked on and is trying to really push, and I think also we have Jordan here with us, TI Jordan, that we've worked in Jordan a lot along with other chapters, since the London Summit commitments that happened a few years ago on beneficial ownership registry. And the beneficial ownership registry is not just that we know who are the companies are, but we really need to know who the beneficial owners are. And that is a challenge because a lot of Panama papers and the leaks that we have seen across different waves has shown that there are enablers of corruption, and enablers that are the ones that are the cover for those corrupt. And we have seen it even in not just poor countries, even in the well-developed, rich countries, that they use those enablers to cover their money somewhere. So part of the work that we have done is try and push, even in the Gulf, and trying to push for recommendations to register the beneficial owners and to publish it. It's not just to register it for the state themselves, but to actually publish it so journalists, civil society, even anti-corruption agencies can actually look for the corrupt based on that. So that's one tool that I think is so important that we keep advocating for it, because it really can help in that. I know we have 4 minutes, but I would like you to answer part of his question in terms of, so who would like to?
I'll start. So I think there is no one size fits all. So it's very situational, depending on the country we're talking about, and depending on the openness within this country, specifically the role of civil society and to which extent civil society is active and influential. So in more or less open context, I would say that in addition to the importance of the role of civil society, also the country that is sending back the money has a certain responsibility in making sure that there is a discussion that is taking place regarding the whereabouts of the money that is going to be recovered or sent back to the country of origin. A discussion about, in a way, to put some conditions maybe through other channels related to the transparency on how those amounts are going to be used, and if those are going to be used, let's say, in a developmental project, to impose or to enforce or to put some pressure to make sure that this project is managed and dispersed in a very transparent manner, where civil society have access to all the information, and not only CSOs, but also the society at large. I think through different diplomatical channels, the right pressure can be put in that direction in a way that would constitute a successful, I would say, type of collaboration, and that can be replicated in other areas also.
Maybe the last note, and then we'll ask.
Yeah, just shortly. It's not maybe ideal solution, but I will bring example what was done in Uzbekistan with these $300 million, right? So, yeah, you cannot guarantee always that the government, which is like created after previous corrupted, is not corrupted, right? So, what was done in Uzbekistan? Switzerland government and Uzbekistan government, they agreed to involve UN, and under UN was created multi-trust fund, and the management council of this fund consists of civil society of Uzbekistan, government, UN, and Switzerland government. So these four sources decides, all money was given to UN now, but these four sources in agreement decide where to use the resources for development projects in Uzbekistan. Maybe this is not the best solution, but it's one of them which is now practiced in Uzbekistan.
You raised your hand. You want to, or you don't want? Okay.
Just a tiny comment. I was triggered by what Hazem has suggested, that the story is always the same. So to me, I would have, for next time, for an asset recovery session, I would really like to hear the story of an investigative journalist who actually tracked like a whole case, so as to...
Sorry to trigger you, Abir.
Sorry?
Sorry that I have triggered you.
No, on the contrary, I'm really happy about that. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Any last thoughts you want to say? I'm not going to go saying you have a few minutes because you can see that we have time.
I'll just be really quick. To your question, non-cooperative jurisdictions, it was raised. My suggestion was, you can do the diplomacy, all of that. I said, why don't we have a study tour, go to that jurisdiction, build the level of trust at a personal, from one official to another, and see if that works. Because we need to be innovative. We need to think out, why isn't it working? Why is it reticent that a jurisdiction's not cooperating? Let's look at different ways of starting to build the trust. It comes back to trust.
Yeah. Yes. Any last thoughts? It's 20 seconds, 19 seconds. Go ahead. Last question, then.
So I think I will talk for my chapel, as we said in French. And yeah, one of the solutions is also, as the gentleman mentioned, is creating a trust fund. But this also means to also bring to the table multilateral development bank. Could be World Bank, could be African Development Bank or Asian Development Bank. But because those institutions are already implementing projects there, and they have also this monitoring system in place. So you can use them and make sure that you have all the stakeholders signing a MOU and clarifying what would be the condition to support those projects there.
Okay, thank you. We were late 5 minutes. I can take 30 minutes, 30 seconds.
Hi there, my name is Prudence Nguju. I work for GIZ. I just wanted to, as we are advocating for tools that are existing, I just wanted to mention one, which is the Common African Position on Asset Recovery, which is a regional instrument, regional tool that was adopted by the African Union. I think it was in 2021, which offer like a range of capacities, expertise, service of accompany for member states to recover the assets, to follow all the procedure to recover the asset. But since the tool was adopted, there's a kind of reluctance from member states to use them. Is it because they are afraid to fight, like the fight between David and Goliath? I don't know, but there was some kind of lobbying that was made by the African Union Commission to call for member states to use that tool, but it remained very, very, very not well known by member states. So maybe also the civil society can also, try to convey the message again. To enforce the member state, African member state, if I can focus on them here to use that tool. Thank you.
Thank you. So access to information, diplomacy, legal challenges, judicial system, laws, preventative, because we have mentioned a lot of challenges, but we have also mentioned a lot of opportunities. And the only thing that I can say is so important from this session, everybody needs to work together. No jurisdiction, the formal institutions, the anti-corruption agencies, or the judiciary, or the prosecutors cannot work alone. And also investigative journalists cannot work alone, and also civil society cannot work alone. And one very important take with also the success that you have said, you have put that in the law, is that it has to be a comprehensive effort, regionally, nationally, and I think globally, that we all work together. We do not sideline each other, because the corrupt know how to find new ways, and we need to keep track of it. So civil society can look at things, the legal system can look at things, the journalists can look at things, but we're there watching them. So I think we can bring some technicalities into the table. And thank you very much. And I hope it just popped up with new questions, new things, how we can think innovatively. But I'm grateful that we can see a wide range of disciplines here, and we have to think together to bring that to reality. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, and don't forget to invite people to the summer celebration at the whole one, I think because it's the longest day of the year. So it's 20th and 21st of June, so it's a very big party. So please enjoy it. Thank you very much.